The AltNet panel. Today I'm joined by three people from the industry. So I'll start with Adam, if you'd like to introduce yourself, please.
Yeah, I'm Adam Gosling. I'm a network architect at CityFibre. My main area is working around automation and operational excellence, so I focus on how do we scale the business, how do we grow, and how do we get the network architects talking to that systems team and all of the joys to actually mean we can deliver service.
Yeah. James?
James Wessing. I'm head of IT development for Freedom Fibre. Most of my focus is building the systems to actually support what we're doing, and also keep getting dragged into doing network stuff as well.
Doug?
Hi, I'm Doug Williams, and I'm the Director of Network Operations. And effectively, I sing the theme tune and write the theme tune. So we engineering, build the network, and then run and operate, so 24/7 network operations.
Super. So everybody in the room can sort of understand why we're on stage to talk about this particular topic. James, you want to go first about your years of industry, a brief overview in your past, and why are you now in the AltNet space?
I'm in the AltNet space because it's a nice challenge to have. I've done this kind of several times, joined a smallish company and then had it grow. And then have it acquired by somebody else, which is always a fun place to be. We kind of focus in the wholesale space, in fact, to the point where we're not a LINX member because we don't have any network that talks at layer 3. It's all layer 2. We have one big customer, TalkTalk, and they take service off us. So our challenges are very much from a wholesale, building a network at scale, and for them quite as quickly as possible, and deliver service back. And it's a challenge because there's a lot of different ways of doing it, but they're all actually the same. And it's trying to work out what fits best.
Cool. Doug, same to you. So your years in industry, brief overview of your past, and why are you now in the AltNet space?
So nearly 3 decades now in the industry. Why am I in the AltNet space? I guess being from originally from Wales, and I've spent those 3 decades, Alcatel-Lucent, Telefonica, Ericsson, building digital subscriber lines, mobile networks all around the world, supporting 24/7 teams, and this was an opportunity to do something back home. In Wales. So that's what drew me to Oggy. Spectrum Internet rebranded as Oggy last year, coming up to a year as Oggy now in June. And actually, I think the timing is right for the AltNet space. So when the opportunity came up to come and talk about why AltNet, I was at Alcatel when the sort of DSL boom arrived, the sort of late 90s, early 2000s. So I'm now on the other side of the fence from the manufacturer, loving it.
Super. And Adam, same to you. So your years in industry, brief overview of your past, and what brought you to AltNet?
Yep, so I think I'm now 3rd decade in the industry. Been working within the internet industry since the days of dial-up. So started off working through testing of DSL solutions and the core internet, spent time in the core internet working for the incumbent, kind of then changed to working in a number of ISPs to see kind of, the whole spectrum. But really the challenge was a new challenge, something new. So, looking at how do we roll out at large scale, how do we scale? And one of the big challenges where I am, and the big challenges I face is we're not really a small startup anymore. We're very much during the pandemic, we've gone from a small startup to a very big AltNet, and we kind of, at the moment, we're having to work through the networks, the systems, how do we do everything at scale, and that's quite an interesting challenge. And it's how do we make things repeatable, automated, and right first time. So there's a lot of big things there about how do we become that big, reliable, alternative network that customers want to work with, essentially.
Super. So first main question, so getting into it now. So how is the AltNet Gold Rush going for you? Doug, how's it going?
I think you discussed it about the the market and doing the wholesale. Obviously, with Oggy, we're doing the building the infrastructure as well as being an ISP. I think one of the original outlays of the conversation was AltNet's working with ISP, and am I not an ISP then? But we are building a massive amount of infrastructure. We've built a 2 terabyte capable ring around South Wales in the last year. And we have a number of areas online and a load of customers. So how's the gold rush going? I think it's going pretty damn good.
Cool. Adam, how's it going for you?
So I think crazy is a good word to describe how it's going. So, we never have a quiet day. We are now building, I think, I've lost count, I think it was either 56 or 60 cities we're building across. We're building at scale. Within that, I'm in the active network space, so we look at the equipment on the end. We're very much now, we started off with a local product, so similar to the OpenReach model, if you wanted to take our service, you met us in one of our exchanges. We've now changed to sell that. We also sell national, and national looks just the same as local, except we do it. So in the last year, we've built a DWDM network across the country. We've then had to change the whole way we deliver products so we can cope with the fact we've got multiple sites in the equation. So how's it going? Very, very busy, but also very good. We've got done a number of very large deals. We've got very good feedback from our customers, so people like our key partners are very happy. We've got several big ISPs signed up. We've got some medium-sized ones, and then quite a few smaller ones coming online now. And we are finding that mix of local and national has been great for getting customers on. It's made the network very complicated, and we're doing a lot of work to how do we simplify that, how do we make the building blocks, but yeah.
And James, to you, have you found the crock of gold yet?
Well, we're heading in the right direction, I think. We got an additional bit of funding on Monday, which was quite nice. That's going to, allow us to start increasing the number of simultaneous build partners. I mean, from our point of view, our challenges and things that make it good and that are working really well is actually we're running an increasing number of build teams who are going out using the OpenReach infrastructure to deliver as much as they can because it's there and the systems have been put in place by OpenReach to allow us to consume it have been actually, in the grand scheme of things, great. I must admit, over the last few years, a lot of other people have made sure that the OpenReach stuff we buy is a lot easier to consume. It's not perfect, but it's a lot easier than it was. So it's making those entering the market now, like ourselves. We're a little over a year old as an organisation. The people involved may have come from a AltNet that was bought by somebody else, but as a team, there's a lot of experience. There's lots of good knowledge there, and we are trying to build at a pace that is scalable and repeatable, and it just keeps happening. So I think the gold's there. I think there's going to be some interesting crashes as people discover that the gold's actually a little bit harder to mine than they thought it was. And it's going to come down to how they've thought about where they're going to build and made sure that they're optimizing what it is they're doing and not just going, oh, look, gold, pretty, must go get. And it's that there's a lot of thought having to go in at the higher levels and make sure that people aren't just rushing and they're actually considering their approach and where to go next.
Yes, so talking about building, when do you think overbuilding will become more prevalent within just the AltNet space? So obviously we've got OpenReach and Virgin Media, and we can classify really CityFibre in the true national sense, but AltNet on AltNet battlegrounds, how's that looking, Adam?
So I think we're starting to see a little bit of it in some cities. I can think of some cities we just started building where we're building one part, another AltNet's building another part, so we're definitely starting to see it. I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens when it happens. Does it mean we change our plans or the other AltNet changes their plans? There may well be a market for that, and it may be with different things in that, as I said, we're a wholesaler, so we're selling to the big ISPs. It may be that there's a market for those and the smaller ISPs. But it's going to be interesting, and I think the other question that might get interesting is how full are those OpenReach ducts getting? So we don't build as much in OpenReach as some people do, but just about everybody now is making use of OpenReach. So I think we're going to start to see, where I live fairly soon, we're going to have OpenReach, Virgin Media, and CityFibre all down the same open reach ducts to get to the houses. So it's going to get interesting, I think.
Yeah. And Doug, how are you seeing it out in Wales with Oggy?
So at the moment, we're not really seeing that. Most of our areas we're the first going in with full fibre. There are some of the areas there's a little bit of an overlap with BT, and certainly the Virgin Media concentration around the capital cities, Cardiff, etc. But yeah, it's gonna happen. But we're not. It's not an issue or not something that we've gone ooh yet.
Right.
But it's gonna. It's like you said, it's gonna happen, and then that'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
Yeah. And James, with yourselves in the Northwest?
So we kind of take a slightly different approach to some of the other networks in that we're not just jumping into big places. We're trying to build on a sort of more rural or semi-urban approach, and we're building in a contiguous way. So we'll start in place A and then move to B and C and try and keep these linked together and share some common backhaul infrastructure, which is great and fantastic. It does mean that sometimes when you see the announcements of where we're building, you look at it and going, why are you building there and then what appears to be somewhere else? And it's more about the sort of underlying build pattern that we're using. We may not be necessarily going in a line if you just look at it from outside, but if you look and see it over time, you'll see that it all joins up together. Now, the problem we've got is we can see people jumping into the juicy bits at the edges of where we're doing and where we're coming together. And we're looking at it going, yeah, we need to build there anyway. We're just going to build, and we'll run into other AltNets. We'll try and play nice. I think there's going to be some, shall we say, fun and games. But I think we're possibly a year off it being a real clash where things are, shall we say, done that shouldn't be being done by subcontractors who think they're being helpful. We have, as it stands, there are places where we are seeing constraints on the open reach available capacity, just because the ducts are nearly full, and we've put our stuff in, great. There's probably not enough room for anybody else to come down because we're in that rural area where there isn't as much capacity on day one. Yeah. And there's a whole conversation to be had about how we deal with that going forward.
Yeah, well, it sort of flows into the next question, which is kind of how can we keep competition with the AltNet space? I think it was Brendan who raised it in 114 to Richard's presentation. So to say, rather than repeating the consolidations of the past, how can we kind of keep this market alive so that it isn't just a race to the bottom anymore and people actually get quality?
I'm going to really say I'd love to give you an answer to that because it's a really good way of doing things.
It's pure utopia.
I think we're going to see consolidation purely because the gold rush that people are talking about is being funded by VCs, and those VCs are going to want to see their return on investment. I think there's room. I think there's room for multiple players. I think you'll end up with some regional players and some national players, and then some hyper-local guys who are fixing a problem that they see, no one's serving us. People like Barn who've gone, right, this is where we're going to do stuff. Yeah. We're not particularly interested in doing anything other, but we'll just keep creeping outwards. And I think that you'll see consolidation in the next year or two. You'll see, some people who have common investment being encouraged to work together before they become a single entity. And it wouldn't surprise me to see some VC funding coming in to actually deliberately go down the aggregating route of buying up those AltNets that are beginning to struggle, that have either run into competition where they've decided to build or they've had a setback. There's a lot of things going on that might cause that to happen.
Yeah. And Doug, to you, because you're obviously, James touched on Barn there, you're sort of the commercialised version of that for Wales at least. Yeah, so how do you want to try and keep competition alive?
Yeah, I'm not going to disagree at all. I'm glad you said it almost. I think for the market in Wales, it's slightly different than the wider the UK, and specifically with Oggy because we are building our own infrastructure as well as using a mix of PIA, etc. We are, I think, we want to collaborate and be open. I think the future for AltNets, the big ISPs, however the lay of the land, how it ends up, is actually it's gonna be more about working in a collaborative way. So transiting people, providing backhaul services, and actually how we can actually all work together with local governments and funding to effectively give a better service to the customers.
Yeah. And Adam, from your perspective, from the sort of CF play?
Yep, so I think covered a lot of it. I think there will be that consolidation, as you both mentioned. I think the other area we might start to see is where, there might be carrier of carriers, so there might be, or aggregator of aggregators, so you might start to see some of the smaller AltNets work with some of the other players to actually provide. So rather than overbuild, you say, you know what, we'll provide the connections to the ISPs, but we'll have other companies working with you. So I think we might start to see both consolidation, but also AltNets working together to provide an aggregated service, so as ISPs don't have to go and talk to 17 different AltNets if they want the coverage they want.
Yeah, so I mean, that kind of goes into the other bit that, James, you sort of alluded to about sort of stranded assets. There may be moments where something's built and then it's just sort of left as an island. There was talk coming out this week from sort of a backstop thing coming out of Ofcom. I'm not quite sure who instigated it or how it was coming about, but the idea that stranded assets, if not swallowed in a consolidation vehicle, may end up being defaulted back to OpenReach through an Ofcom mechanism.
So the supply of last resort piece has been sort of been floating around for quite some time, and originally when it was first mooted, the whole point was there were AltNets. AltNets didn't exist in the way they do today, and it was incredibly easy for those assets to go to the wholesaler and from the wholesaler to the network owner. So if an ISP went bump, then their assets could be taken over by BT Wholesale potentially, because BT Wholesale were in the situation where they could take over those assets relatively easily. When you get to AltNets, it becomes much more complicated and much more difficult to say, well, if that AltNet fails, how do we sort of rescue those customers? And it's because of what's happened in the gas and electricity market and watching those suppliers go bump, and the supplier of last resort was already set up, was already in place. It hasn't worked well. For a lot of people, it hasn't worked well. And I think this is a reaction to that situation. INCA is the network cooperative for independent network operators, and they are trying to get a common viewpoint and a solution. There's nothing there yet. It's very early stages. But potentially there's got to be some method that maybe could be related to, as it stands, once you have code powers, you have to contribute to a fund that is used to repair any mess you leave behind should you go bump. And there's potentially, through that same mechanism, the ability to maintain and operate that stranded asset until somebody buys it. Yep. Where that kind of falls down and where it could be a bit more of an issue is where you've got competition and overbuild, and how you deal with an asset that no one wants, and those customers haven't got that ability. But with one-touch switching coming as well, there's a whole raft of things that might solve the problem even without needing the supply of last resort PIP.
Well, speaking of assets that people don't want, that's how kind of CityFibre started in the respect of swallowing up all the council fibre. So how does CF see the, I mean, it's obviously fresh-ish sort of on the table, but is CityFibre going to try and bully their way in?
I personally don't know what the company's plans are. I know we do certainly talk about, we are one of those AltNets who keep an eye on what everybody else is doing, partly to see what everybody else is doing, but also to look at how well is it being built? Is it something we might want to take over? So we kind of, we do keep our eye on that, and we are aware of it. And knowing what Greg's like, I can fully see him saying, what, we'll grab that. So potentially, yes. I think, as you mentioned, the interesting one is the assets that nobody wants. We had that before. If you look at Digital Region, Digital Region failed. The cabinets were of a quality that nobody wanted. The final answer for that one was actually that OpenReach did take it over, but essentially OpenReach just ripped all the cabinets out and installed their own as a complete replacement. So I think it's going to be interesting to see if there's overbuild. I think more about switching potentially. If there's not overbuild, we need to look at who is the right answer. It could be OpenReach, but I suspect an AltNet would be better to take on those customers because they're more flexible and they'll be able to work with the systems in a better way.
You're right, and I actually think that we need to leverage the power of Ofcom so that we don't end up in those situations again. I mean, one of the things when we met with Ofcom was describing how we're not building something for the short term. So some of the things, certainly from back in the DSL days, was not building the resilience in, not planning for the future, only looking at the short term, a load of customers, and then consolidate, etc. So I think there's an opportunity here as an industry for us to lean on Ofcom to almost hold us all to account, to make sure that we're building stuff that could be taken over in the event of trouble, like we've seen in the power market. But will that happen in a tick and move over? Probably not. It would probably we'll have this bit and we can't have that bit and so on. But I think the goal is to build for the future, build resilience in, and build credible, solid networks, really.
So going on that topic of sort of resilience, it may not affect you guys so much at CityFibre, Adam, but with OpenReach closing down exchanges now on a fairly regular basis, what sort of plans has Oggy got then to keep on top of that, or have you already just decided to avoid it altogether? No, not at all. We wouldn't be here now without the support of the model of the OpenReach using using the exchanges, MPIA, etc., and the DFX product. We are putting our own fibre in, but we are also using DFX where we can. So yeah, we're very grateful to that model. But at the same time, our cabinets are effectively exchanges. So we're keeping a close eye on which are the likelihoods, and obviously we're putting our equipment in the larger, the handover exchanges with BT. So it shouldn't affect us. In fact, we'll come along for the ride. Sure. So obviously, Adam from CityFibre, you guys actively embrace not doing this with the porter cabins, as I like to call them.
Yep. So I mean, the standard design we've got is to avoid OpenReach exchanges wherever possible. We build our own infrastructure. So as you mentioned, we have the container design. So we have done that as pretty much as many places as we can. Some cities are really hard. I mean, one of the big challenges is actually finding the land that is suitable to put those cabinets. So we do use OpenReach in a very small number of places. The big thing that will hit us, though, and we do work with ISPs on this, is whilst we're not in exchanges, a lot of the handovers we give to all of our customers are in exchanges. So we do a lot of work and talking to the ISPs to make sure, we're aware of it. We've got cable routes to the ones we think are going to be the longer term exchanges. So yeah, we're less impacted, but certainly, it's something we're watching and something we're actively talking to customers about to how do we avoid that.
And James?
Yeah, we have the advantage of, we knew about the exchange closures when we started doing design. So we are building outside the exchanges that will be left, probably, because it's not 100% certain yet. Yeah. But the ones we think are going to be left, we're building 2 and then using cable links to connect into them. But the rest of the stuff we're building outside in whatever shape makes sense in that particular area, using a data center, using larger cabinets, using whatever makes sense at that particular location, and then just doing the handover at those at the handover exchanges that people are obviously going to want to build to if they want to pick up OpenReach services anyway.
Yeah. So moving on to that sort of actually building stuff, and that's a kind of challenge to try and keep everybody connected. Obviously, everybody loves a good war story. So, Doug, to you. So, what's been the most interesting challenge Oggy's had to date at this point? And there could be a few, but what comes to mind?
Yeah, I had a lot more hair a year ago. So, interestingly, I think one of the more interesting challenges, because there's a lot of obvious challenges that I suspect everybody has, was actually when we started, We didn't have a lab. We didn't really have a network location. We had just office space in Cardiff from Spectrum. So joining and then having a sudden change of access vendor as well. So the challenge was, how do we do any testing, configuration, make sure all of the IT systems are all working, the provisioning. Does voice actually work across the PON network, etc.? So I had to scratch my head, and my team really came up to the challenge. Really, we approached Graham Smith in Melksham, who actually make adult Meccano, which is it's just racking, that it's all open, and we took over the corner of the office and turned it into a lab. Which worked for us. It was great. We're engineers. It was messy. There was cables everywhere. But we got it all up and running. It was quite noisy. It was hot. It was loud. Nobody else liked it. But yeah, it was. We had to do it, and that was an interesting challenge, because turning a bit of an office into a lab, just the power requirements, air conditioning, connectivity was interesting.
Yeah, and Adam, what have you seen in your tenure at CityFibre?
So I think probably the biggest challenge for us was, you probably saw last year, the launch of Vodafone National. So we had to go from a local-only provider to a national provider, which meant we had to procure fibre. We have some of our own, but we had to also procure things. We had to get an entire new DWDM network, and then we actually had to sign the contract and launch the product. And I think, as crazy as it sounds, it was literally the PR went out as the contract was signed. We then actually started taking orders the following day, and that was literally in the middle of a pandemic. We decided, wouldn't it be great? Let's build a national network and start selling a new service, and we did it. We launched. We got the first customers on a week after they signed the contract.
Yeah, and for you, James?
Our challenges have been a bit interesting. I mean, we went through a whole series of vendor selection, and that was relatively straightforward. Then we started placing orders, and that was straightforward. And now we're currently averaging 50 plus weeks lead time to get hardware. So that's a challenge, but we're just having to order it. BT have kindly gobbled every single little last bit of fibre that they can get their hands on, which is, again, adds to the challenge of that.
And us.
Well, yeah. Basically, OpenReach has taken the blame for gobbling it up. I get the sneaking suspicion there's lots of providers who've done that. I think, to be honest, the most surprising thing is how easy OpenReach and BT have been to work with. I know that sounds really bad, and I have history for having a go at BT, but in this case, I think they've done really well. There are some things I'd like to fix, and there's a lot of information in BT systems that is wrong. Sitting there trying to work out where poles, how hard is it to lose a telegraph pole? I mean,
easy. Apparently,
actually, yeah. You'd think it'd be very easy to know where your telegraph pole. I can understand when you put stuff underground, you might get it wrong, you might lose it. But a telegraph pole is one of those things. Actually, not just that telegraph pole, 25 telegraph poles that apparently aren't going down the road we thought they were, and are somewhere else. Again, it takes time to fix. It's one of those things you learn. And the other one is, the fun one is, why are there street lights on these telegraph poles? That was a fun one. Finding out there was powered lighting that meant we couldn't use them. In fact, OpenReach couldn't use them either, and they were kind of annoyed about. Was fun, and it's that whole learning process of, there's not that many of them. But these little things that you run into that you go, oh, great, fine, move on to the next village. It's going to be, oh, okay, it's a bridge, okay? How do I cross the bridge? Right, okay, it's a duct across the bridge. No, there's no duct across the bridge. Okay, who owns the bridge? Oh, it's a grade 2 listed bridge. Oh.
Or Network Rail, or...
No, just no. Step away from the railway.
Let's not talk about Network Rail. The I think. Yeah, definitely not talk about network rail. I think a word I've come to loathe really is indicative.
Yes.
Maps that
Yes.
are indicative. They're not indicative. They're just plain wrong.
No, they're not wrong. They're close to being right. It's just
Who's
not
close?
just yeah.
I tell you what, you need to. So one of the things I was doing this time last year before I changed companies is when I went in the exchanges. Usually in the proper the actual exchange portion, there was the original hand-drawn maps. So if you ever find those, I bet they're accurate.
Probably.
Yeah.
Don't be silly. I mean, the other challenge. I mean, to be honest, the other challenge is finding build partners to go out and do the work, who are of the quality that we need. It's a challenge. We found some, but they've only got so many teams, and I think that could be a major. For the next, as growth, as more people come into the market, as more growth is, I think there's going to be a big competition for those build partners.
Yeah, well, I'm going to say, if you want a couple of drums of fibre, just come round the town near me. The current installer, talking about bad build quality, is currently bringing the fibres up out the ground and then just like tipping the drum and leaving it on somebody's lawn. So there's plenty of drums lying around that are now owned essentially by that house. So let me know. I'm sure there's plenty. So we talked about some of the obstacles in there, or some physical obstacles and challenges there, and a bit of policy, and I'm sure Neil would love talking to you about the OpenReach stuff over the social. But, the other bit to look at it the other way is, great, we're putting all these big bits of fibre down roads, but does everybody want FTTP? Does everybody actually want fibre? What kind of, reaction, shall we say, are you coming across as you go down the road? We'll start with Doug. We'll let James compose himself.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. I think we, and I say we, they, some of us need a lesson in what FTTP is. I don't think the industry has done, and Ofcom have not done any favours by allowing the term full fibre when it's clearly not full fibre. So it's fair to say that there is a misconception. There are ways that we're going to get around this as we go forward. Thankfully for us, most of the areas that we're going into first are actually welcoming us. Obviously, you have the early adopters that know fully about it, but then some of the unfortunately some of the locations in Wales that don't even have what you would consider fast connectivity. They're actually not caring whether it's fibre or not. They just want reliable connectivity. So yes, they do want it. But I think as an industry, we need to work on the definition of what it is, and actually potentially move away from the acronyms and just deliver a service.
Yeah, James, how are you finding so far?
So there are a few things that are really good. I mean, if you tell someone you're going to give them nice, fast broadband that's going to work all the time, yeah, they'll take it fine. They then go, how much does it cost? We're a wholesaler. That's kind of, we just go speak to one of our ISP partners. It's fine. So that side's quite easy. There are some interesting challenges when it comes to things like Martin Lewis telling people to save money by turning off their broadband routers overnight. It's great, 11 o'clock at night we get a whole bunch of dying gasps from things being turned off, especially if it's the last one on a port, which raises a lovely alarm. Yay, great. Well, that does mean we can spot when certain villages have actually had a power cut, so there's great stuff like that. I think there's a whole piece around digital voice, which I think is a much more difficult sell.
come to that in a minute.
Oh, okay, so I won't go into that one. But actually, what we found is there are certain streets, clusters, places where we turn up, connect one customer, and then about 2 days later, we have a bunch of orders.
Yeah.
Because they've just told everybody. They've gone from having intermittent, poor service to it just works. And it's fast, and I can do everything. And my Netflix isn't timing out every now and again.
Yeah.
And they just go, yeah, fine. And you can see it. You can see where people have gone into dodgy areas. If you go into an area where they've already got okay DSL, fine, don't care. You have to do a sales job on them. But when it goes into an area that's got, should we say, issues, I mean, it might be a dodgy cabinet. It might be a cabinet that has more issues than most, and you suddenly see that improvement, and you'll see a bunch of orders. It's usually 2 or 3 days after that first one's gone in and it's been stable.
It's a definite ripple, isn't there?
Yeah, definitely. And the other one that happens really well is if you get a champion, somebody that thinks you're brilliant and thinks that fibre is the way to go, they will literally go and knock on the neighbours' doors to get everybody on board, because they tend to also be the person that's been doing everyone's IT support.
Yeah, so they see the benefit going forward.
Yeah, and if I could fix Wi-Fi in the home, that'd be brilliant. Please.
Yeah, well, there's plenty of adverts about that. So from CityFibre's perspective, you're not having people turn up with pitchforks and blocking roads or anything?
No, I mean, I think most of it, as was mentioned, we get, we're more of a wholesaler, so we don't see the end customer. I think I've seen the same thing. We see clusters. So we don't get to hear too much from the ISPs. Mainly when we do see issues, it's because people don't, I think this is where OpenReach has helped with the DPA, in that it's the digging up that sometimes when you turn up and go, I need to dig your drive up, we do get cancellations at that point. So I think it's about making it easy, making it understood. I had the classic one from a neighbour. We got fibre, and then he came over and said, I ordered fibre, but they didn't put the box on my house like you had. Any idea what I did wrong? And I checked, and he'd ordered TalkTalk fibre broadband, not TalkTalk super fast fibre broadband. So it was FTTC. So I think, there's a big education piece, and certainly I'm seeing it where you'll see one house get fibre, and then lots of houses around them get it. So I think it's that we need to, people just want good, reliable internet. They don't care if it's a fibre or not, really.
Yeah. I think the pitchfork thing, you're always going to get, whether it's a gas pipe coming in, a new main or new fibre, you'll get upset. And we are of the age of the Facebook group, the community group, but we're having improvement, and even the champions, one person will complain or say something derogatory about, we don't want this, and think, we don't need to say anything. Everybody else will jump in and just say, no, we need this. This is bringing, better house prices, support to the village, etc., etc. So, but being hyper-local for us is a big thing. So working with the communities and making sure they know what we're doing and when we're doing it. So, and they know that it's only a small disruption, and we're actually doing something for the village, for the town, etc. So there's it's mostly welcoming.
Yep.
Mostly welcoming.
And I think that's the difference. There's certainly one thing I've seen is we will go to a city, we will explain to the city what we're doing. We have champions. We'll do co-branded things with the big ISPs. If you take OpenReach, it's almost like they come round in the middle of the night and run the fibre through. So you just get a letter saying you can now have fibre. Or people are working and you don't know why. It's a very, very different world, and certainly that engagement to tell people you're coming, what the disruption is going to be and when it's going to be. And I think, as James said, working with good build partners and having very good build quality assurance teams that sit on the contractors is what you need to do to make sure you're building to high quality, so we don't get the complaints and then people want the service.
Yeah, I was just going to say, one thing, we actually got to the point where our CEO recorded a video explaining why we're using poles, and because it came up quite a lot, and it's now, whenever we start in a new area, we get hold of the parish council, we'll talk to them, we'll explain what's going to happen, that we will be using poles, we will be doing ducts, we will be doing all sorts of different things, but just to help them. And there's this video, you if anyone asks, you can show them the video, and it explains why we're using the pole. Yeah. And it's things like that where, a marketing team of, we're a wholesaler, we don't have a marketing team, we have one person, and they do a fantastic job of making sure there's the material to back up and do that explanation work.
Yeah. Jez, how are we for time?
Technically got 4 minutes.
4 minutes. Have we got any questions from the floor before I ask my last one then? So any questions from the floor? I think somebody's got a hand up. I can't see where though.
Dave's got a question.
Yeah, Dave.
Mr. Reader.
Can't let you get off without one, James. You touched on voice earlier. I wondered if anyone had any thoughts about the potential absence of battery backup on subscriber lines for voice.
Anyone else want to answer that first?
I think it worries me that it's something we provide as an option, but we don't provide the voice service. The voice service is provided by the ISP, and it does worry me that we're going to get into the situation where it's a problem. But at the same time, I think it's something that can be solved. I think those people that don't have a good mobile signal should be definitely being educated about what it means to move to digital voice. But this isn't just a problem for the AltNets. This is a problem for everyone, and the whole concept of digital voice, and the whole, actually, what does it mean to have or not have this connectivity at any point in time?
I think you're right. It's a problem for the industry, my mother has better connectivity than me. She's on CityFibre, but she has a decked phone. She's elderly, and if her power goes, the fact that there's no battery backup on that voice, well, her decked phone wouldn't work anyway. But in those areas where there is no mobile coverage, I think as an industry we could do something different.
Yeah.
What that is.
Yeah, and I think that's the same thing. We offer battery backup as an option to the ISPs. I think there's probably only one that takes it, but we do offer that. But it's that bigger problem. It's like, great, we've provided the ONT will stay on, but if your router doesn't stay on, if your decked base station doesn't stay on, you've still not got the service. So I think it's educating people about how it works and making sure people have got the right answer. You know, some people it'll be mobile, some people they may need a battery solution that provides all of their telephony in that situation.
Yeah, I think we've got one last question from the floor.
Hello. With all the build that you're going out and mentioning about overbuild and various things like that, is there a concern that build out in deprived areas will be missed? Because, you know, if you're making a decision where you're going to build, you're going to try and build in a more affluent area where you're going to, you know, almost guarantee an income, as opposed to a deprived area which are likely to not necessarily.
So the interesting one we hit with that, which we've actually turned things around a little bit, was the build partners. You could give them a plan, say, past this many houses. Actually, they'll probably go and build the deprived area because it's probably on poles, it's quick to build, it's overhead. They'll go and ignore the leafy suburb where the houses are spaced a long distance apart and need underground feeding because it costs more and takes longer. So it can happen. One of the things in CityFibre is we always try and build as much of the city as possible. So we plan the whole city. But certainly we actually find that we found, and we've adjusted it a little bit, that it wasn't actually the affluent areas our build partners would pick to build first because it was easier to build some of the lower cost housing.
Yeah, and from our perspective, the areas that we're building aren't definitely not the easy areas, and then they're not the affluent areas as well. There's a whole list of criteria, but affluent is certainly not in there.
Sorry, we are kind of directing where we build. We try and build as much as is practical. At the end of the day, one of our ISP customers is a low-cost brand and quite happy to target those deprived areas, and that's some of their customer base. So they're more than happy that we go through as much as possible. Our limitations tend to be long driveways. That's brutally honest. Those are the ones we kind of look at and go, yeah, we can't really get that on a pole. We'll have to dig all that way, and we might accidentally, we'll go past it, but we might not sell it unless we have to. But when it comes to more dense, low less affluent areas, they're actually relatively easy to build. The complicated ones tend to be things like new housing estates that haven't done a good job with their infrastructure.
Or haven't been adopted, so we can't get the
There is that as well.
Either or.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So with that, that's time. Thank you very much, gentlemen. So I'd like to thank Adam, James, and Doug. Thank you all for listening. We'll see you next time.